Hi there, I'm Jamie Lenman. I'm a musician and illustrator from Hampshire, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the West End Centre in Aldershot, which is one of my favourite independent venues for Independent Venue Week. I sort of came up in music through the Hampshire and Surrey scene, a lot of which centred around the West End Centre in Aldershot. And when we were in a band, I was in a band called Reuben from my sort of early teens into my early 20s. And everyone wanted to get a gig at the West End because they had great gigs. They had great bands. They got bands from out of towns to play there, so it was really exciting. And everyone's ambition was to play a show at the West End. And when we finally started getting booked at the West End, we knew we'd made it. And we were always there. It was our base of operations for several reasons. Firstly, we were there because we played so many gigs ourselves in Reuben at the West End Centre. But also, even when we weren't playing a gig there, chances are we would be there for whoever was playing a gig. If we weren't playing the gig ourselves, we were watching other people because the gigs were always great. But also because for most of the band, our manager was a man called Barney Jevons, who was running the venue at the time. So if we weren't there for a gig or to watch someone else's gig, we were there to see Barney or, take part of something. There was always something happening at the Westie, and over time we began to know the rest of the staff, the bar staff, the security staff, Julie on the sound desk, and they became, really, it sounds cheesy, but they became our family. And indeed, I have long ongoing relationships with many of those people. I still see all of them, really, even though I haven't been to the Westie for a long time. The great thing about the Westie is that it's not just for gigs. It's a community centre, and that, although that was a bit odd for us at the time, because you'd have like a creche going on in one room and a pottery class in the other room, and this was supposed to be a rock and roll place. It could be anything. It could be any number of wonderful things, and it could be them all at once. You could have, a gallery opening in one room, and you could have a cake baking class in another room, and then you could have a gig on in the main room, or theatre. I remember going there to see lots of theatre shows, lots of stand-up shows. It's everything in one venue, and it really is wonderful. And to have something like that, to have a little bastion of art in a town like Aldershot, which has gone through various periods of, deprivation, and I'm not sure anyone would name Aldershot as the flower of culture in Hampshire, and yet it has the Westie there, right at the top, sort of trickling down art into the dark streets from the little centre there. So yeah, it really is. It's incredibly meaningful. When I was starting out in my musical career, local venues obviously was all we had. You couldn't just march straight up to London and say give us a gig. It was incredibly hard to crack onto the national scene, and so we really wore out venues like the Westie and the Tumbledown Dick in Farnborough, and to a certain extent the Star and Guild. For places like this, we would just ping pong around them like balls in a pinball machine, and they never got sick of us. They always invited us back. We used to sell tickets, let's be frank, and we had a great time. It was always a party. And it didn't matter if it was our gig or if it was someone else's gig. It was all the same faces. It was a great scene. And the Westie, dare I say it, was the centre of that scene. And I haven't really been part of the local scene for some time now. I'm part of the more national scene. But I hope there is still a scene at the Westie. And I go back whenever I can. And some of the same familiar faces are still there. And it's wonderful to see them. I think performing at a venue like the Westie, when you can have, at a time when you could pack the place with people, it can feel very intimate. And it used to be so intimate when I was going there as a kid that the audience would sort of sit on the stage. You used to get people just like hanging out on the stage whilst the bands were performing. That's how intimate it got. And I have to say, I wasn't always keen on that. It used to get in the way of my pedals, but it felt like one of those places where the stage isn't really a barrier. It felt like the audience were part of the show, and that was part of the fun. Certainly when we started out, that was wonderful. There are really too many memorable moments to talk to you about the Westie. All of them were memorable. I remember once doing a gig there with a band called Dreyfus, who decided that they wanted two people to be sitting on stage playing a game of chess in front of the drums, in a sort of extreme version of like affected indifference to the band. It was like being too cool for school to such an extent that you were so unimpressed by the band that you were playing a game of chess in front of the drums. So I sat on stage for the whole show of Dreyfus's set, who I loved, just playing a game of chess. That was pretty good. But also every year towards the end of my band and also towards the start of my solo career, I still try whenever I can to do a Christmas show every now and then. We used to do one every year in Euban, and I've been back a few times on my own to do a Christmas show. That's always very special because it was always like, I keep using this phrase that it was like a party, but that was like, a Christmas office party. That's my version of an office party. The musician's version of an office party is a gig. And so the Christmas shows were always fun, and we'd come on in funny jumpers or whatever. But also when I had a long break from music after my band finished, and then when I came back as a solo artist, I chose the Westie as I did a secret gig at the Westie without telling anyone, under an assumed name. And it needed to be the Westie because I knew that I was comfortable there. And that night sticks in my memory because getting on the stage really sort of took me back to my roots. It's so cheesy, isn't it? But it's true, because performing on that stage plugged me right back into what I was doing. And it brought back a lot of muscle memory, which ironically is what my record was called. So it's very fitting. I think really for the Westie, what I would hope, obviously during this shambolic period we're living through, is that it can carry on, and I hope it's still there when live music comes back. And I guess that's up to you watching this to make sure that you keep in touch with the Westie, and me. Let's face it, I need to keep in touch with the Westie, and if they've got any online initiatives going on, make sure you get on it. If they've got online classes, check them out, check in with them on their Facebook page, and just keep them going, because venues, especially in Independent Venue Week, I've been talking to a lot of venues who are struggling, and they're doing their best to make it work, and it's up to us to support them, the artists, but also the audiences. And I just really hope, and I'm quietly confident, that the Westie will be there when we all come back, and I can't wait to go to another show at the Westie. I miss you.